The sniper. The sniper deliberately wounds the enemy, rather than killing him, in order to draw more enemy units into the firing zone, so that he can then fire on them as they assist the wounded. Salvo. The purpose of this technique is to take the enemy by surprise and defeat him as quickly as possible to avoid his retaliation. This is achieved by a simultaneous salvo from all guns. This technique is particularly effective in the naval battles between ships, as several bursts are more visible than one. It was used extensively during World Wars I and II, but cruise missiles are now much more commonly used. Hull down position. To take the hull down position, the tank must be on the reverse slope of the hill or use cover to hide itself as much as possible. In this position, only the gun barrel will be visible, making it difficult for the enemy to detect and engage the tank. This method is still used in modern warfare, but it has its disadvantages. It is not suitable for all types of terrain, especially in flat areas. The tank must have a large enough angle of declination of the gun and stay in one position to not give itself away. When moving from defense to attack, the tank will be in a disadvantageous position, as it will be looking upwards and at risk of hitting its lower, most vulnerable part. Creeping barrage. This technique involves the gradual advance of artillery fire to provide cover for infantry pushing forward towards enemy trenches. It is more effective than using artillery directly on trenches, since most of the time they were resistant to such attacks. Defenders could be easily replaced, and barbed wire remained unharmed. However, it is quite dangerous as it requires coordination between infantry and artillery to avoid explosions occurring too close to the advancing troops. Blitzkrieg. This technique was famously used by the Germans during World War II and consists of a rapid, overwhelming, and dense force concentration in an arrow shape. Mechanized and motorized infantry, along with armored units, are at the forefront with the intent not to attack the actual front line, but to break through it. Artillery and close air support are also utilized. One of the biggest advantages of this technique is that it unbalances the enemy by continuously changing the front lines. Foxholes. Foxholes are positions designed for cover and to hold when enemies are near, with camouflage applied to the opening. This technique is said to have been originally created to combat blitzkrieg. There were some variations. For example, the Germans added turrets to them, and the Japanese made theirs better concealed by limiting the space to accommodate only one infantry unit, making it more effective for ambushes than for cover. Recon by fire. This technique involves firing on likely enemy positions to see if they react, with the goal of confirming their presence or absence. Single envelopment one decoy division attacks the front, while another moves to the enemy's rear from the sides, cutting off reinforcements and communications, or attacking them from behind. Pincer movement. In a pincer movement, the central units hold their position in the center, while the two wings move outward and flank the enemy, forcing them to fight on two fronts and eventually encircling them. Oblique order. This is another flanking tactic where one part of the army concentrates on one side, while the other part gradually moves in an oblique direction to break through the enemy line using force concentration. Feigned retreat. Pretending to retreat to lure the enemy into a vulnerable position. However, this maneuver often turns into a real retreat because undisciplined troops may lose cohesion and actually retreat. Inverted wedge. The center slowly retreats under enemy pressure while the wings push forward, attempting to encircle the enemy. This tactic places significant responsibility on the wings. Crossing the TA line of warships crosses in front of an enemy line, allowing all horizontal warships to fire at the vertical ships with every gun, while the vertical ships can only attack with their forward guns. Bounding overwatch. An alternating movement tactic that helps units advance while under fire? The team is split into two parts. One provides overwatch while the other maneuvers. When the moving part of the team reaches its destination, they stop and provide suppressive fire to cover the other part, which then starts moving and the process repeats. Ambush conducted by hidden units that wait for favorable positions or conditions to launch an attack. Skirmishers are troops positioned in front of the main units, maintaining a dispersed formation. They harass the enemy by engaging in small, sporadic combat to delay their movement, disrupt their attack, or weaken their morale. Trench raiding used in World War I. This tactic involved making small-scale nighttime surprise attacks on enemy trenches. Raiders would slowly creep up on the sentries, guarding a small sector of the trench line, quietly kill them, and throw grenades into the dugouts where enemies slept. This tactic was also used to capture or disable high-value equipment and gather intelligence by seizing documents. Returning raiders risked friendly fire, so they typically used a password system to identify themselves. Swarming. Swarming is used to overcome the defenses of a primary objective by attacking with multiple autonomous units. It is mainly used in asymmetric warfare, when one side has significantly less capability or size. This tactic confuses the enemy through irregular attacks that are usually launched from multiple positions. Defeat in detail. This tactic is used against a more numerous enemy and involves dividing your force into smaller parts, causing the enemy to divide their forces as well. You then bring a large portion of your force to engage small enemy units in sequence, rather than fighting the bulk of the enemy's divisions all at once. Air interdiction. This involves bombing strategic points that don't pose an immediate threat, but can change the course of the war. A distinction must be made between tactical and strategic air interdiction. Tactical air interdiction aims to affect events rapidly or immediately, such as by bombing supplies en route to the active battle area. Strategic air interdiction focuses on longer-term benefits, usually targeting bridges, roads, etc. This differs from strategic bombing, which is unrelated to ground operations. Scorched earth. This tactic involves retreating and destroying anything the enemy might need, such as food sources and transportation. It was famously used by Russia against Germany in the Second World War, supported by the vast size of Russian territory and the freezing cold winter. Shout out to those who support my channel through Patreon